We've got big news out of Seattle regarding their efforts to lure an NHL and an NBA team back to their city. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If this is your first time on the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and analyze all things in the NHL on this channel, so if you're a big hockey fan, consider hitting that subscribe button now so you don't miss anything. Alright, diving into today's content, let's discuss the City of Seattle. Recently, the City Council of Seattle has approved a $600 million funding effort to renovate Key Arena in order to bring back, hopefully, the NBA and bring a new NHL team to the city as well. Obviously, the City of Seattle is anxious to bring professional sports to their city, and they've proven that with their recent vote just a few days ago. Now, obviously, there's already been an interested ownership group to bring an NHL franchise to Seattle, and as we all know, the NHL has had their eye on the City of Seattle for a long time. And to be honest, if the City of Seattle had been ready a little bit sooner, they probably, I believe, in my opinion, would have gotten the nod over Vegas to have a team before the Golden Knights in the past couple of years here, but they just were not ready. They did not have the funding in place, and even though there was interest in ownership, they've really spiked their interest since the Vegas team has come together. So obviously this is big news. The city's ready, they've got the funding in place, the arena is going to be renovated and completed, and the ownership group is in place. They're more than likely going to be starting a ticket drive soon as well to gauge interest for the local residents. And this seems inevitable that more than likely Seattle is going to be the next NHL franchise. Now, as we've discussed on this channel before, we've already had our thoughts around the fact that Seattle was a pretty top contender to land this franchise. And it looks like that the most likely scenario would see them starting play during the 2021 NHL season. Obviously, that's the time frame, as we discussed on this channel before, that the arena should have everything completed and ready for hockey by the fall of 2020. So obviously that gives enough time for the NHL to go through its expansion process. So it's a long process, and the fact that they can be ready for 2020 seems very logical that this could happen. So obviously the City of Seattle not only looking for hockey here, I really believe they want to bring back the NBA as well. Obviously, as most of you know, they had a long history with the Seattle Supersonics, but they lost that franchise a while back as they moved to Oklahoma. So obviously, I think the City of Seattle would do well with both teams. I know we've already heard quotes from other teams around the league saying their thoughts on Seattle would be fantastic. I know the Vancouver Canucks seemed very interested, because like as I mentioned before here as well, that's an instant rivalry. Even though Canada has Vancouver and Seattle's in the US, they're very, very close to each other, and there's a lot of people that travel back and forth between those two cities. So there's an instant arrival there, which is great. Now the only part of this is it does conquer the imbalance right now of East versus West. It makes the two conferences even, should everything else remain the same between now and then. And the only other issue it creates is the fact that Seattle, being in the Pacific Northwest, obviously would have to go in the Pacific Division. They're not going to put Seattle in the Central. That just wouldn't make any sense. And I can't imagine Seattle, as part of their expansion process to pay all this money, would want to be part of that division. So what happens next? If this goes through, what happens to realign the divisions? Obviously, if everything stays the same, one of the existing Pacific Division teams would have to move over to the Central. So that's a possibility. And, you know, if people might argue that that's an easy choice, because right now the Coyotes probably won't be in Arizona come 2020. And if that were the case, you know, maybe we could look at maybe moving them to Houston. That would make a lot of sense, as we've already discussed on this channel before. There certainly is some teams that need to possibly look at relocation. I know we discussed the Carolina Hurricanes as well, and there's been a lot of news around them, and we're going to be making a separate video to discuss that a little bit more in depth, most likely today or tomorrow as well. So stay tuned for that. So this isn't the only video that's going to be released on this channel over today and tomorrow regarding expansion and relocation, because there's all kinds of news and topics around this topic right now. So obviously, you know, looks good for Seattle. They've got ownership in place, and the ownership group has lots of money. They've got the arena money to renovate, which is great. They're more than likely going to be doing a ticket drive soon. The NHL's already announced to accept an application for expansion. They've set the fee at $650 million, which is really crazy when you think about it, especially considering that every time the NHL has expanded, the expansion fee was higher than the previous time. But we just saw expansion happen with Vegas paying $500 million. So obviously that's a substantial increase in such a short time. Obviously the NHL feels they can justify that. And really for all the other teams and for revenue sharing and splitting, that's going to help tremendously from a business perspective as well. And that might actually go into play for the, obviously the next CBA is going to have to be negotiated as well. So, you know, that's obviously going to be a point of contention between the NHL and the Players Association as we approach negotiations on that in the next couple of years. So give me your thoughts. What do you think Seattle is a lock for the next NHL franchise? Personally, I do. I think everything is lined up just perfect. As we've discussed in this channel before, there's been 2 or 3, well, really 3 cities that are really, in my opinion, are not only have the fan support, the arena, and are ready. And that was Seattle was one of the first ones we talked about. Quebec City's obviously been in play for a long time. You know, right now, it's not in the cards for Quebec City for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the NHL really wants to expand west, and they're in the east, so they got that going against them. The fact that the Canadian dollar has slumped since they first started this process, and that really, if you convert the expansion fee to Canadian dollars, that we're getting up around $800+ million, and that just seems astronomical for the group in Quebec to come up with that. You know, and obviously, I think more likely for Quebec to get a team, it's going to have to be through relocation, and as we know, the NHL really tries at all costs not to do that. So at some point though, I think that it's going to happen. I think there's a couple of teams that are inevitable that are going to have to move sooner or later. Doesn't look like there's going to be any movement real soon. I think the only possibility being the Coyotes. If that were to happen, I think the most likely destination for them would be Houston. It keeps them in the West. It kind of keeps that balance going. It makes it easier to move them to the Central. And if Houston were to land the Coyotes, or any other franchise for that matter, especially, but it would make it easier if it's one coming from the Pacific Division already to line everything up that you don't have to worry about realignment. So come 2020, what do you think? Do you think Seattle's going to land the expansion franchise? And do you think we'll see the Coyotes move to Houston? It certainly would create the perfect balance in the West. It makes it easy to move a team out of the Pacific into the Central. It puts Seattle in the Pacific where they would belong, and it would create the perfect balance. So give me some comments down below. What do you think? Do you think Seattle's a lock to get this franchise? And if so, do you think it'll be the Coyotes going to the Central regardless of if they move or not? I think they're the most logical destination. You can't move any of the California teams. You wouldn't move Seattle. I mean, if you look at all the other options that are possible there, they probably make the most sense, even though they are more of a Western team. But at the same time, if they land in Houston, then that could solve everything, and that would be the perfect solution and the easiest solution from a lot of other standpoints. So let me know what you think of that. Is that likely to gonna happen? So make sure you comment down below regarding that. Now, as far as the NBA returning to Seattle, do you think that's a possibility as well? I certainly do. I know the NBA has made comments before acknowledging that if they were to expand again, that Seattle would certainly be you know, a top destination they would consider going back to. There's history there. You know, I think one of the main issues before certainly was around the arena. You know, obviously with the arena solution being in place and the fact that they have history there, and the fan support wasn't exactly the problem in the past. So really, I don't see why the NBA wouldn't go back to Seattle. I mean, we've seen it happen before with other cities when they've had to move. When depending on what the issues were, if it's around ownership or whatnot, if it's, you know, when it's not regarding fan support, which is obviously the big driver, and they obviously have to have the arena, and they would have that now. So I certainly don't see any reason why in the next, I guess 3-4 years here, that we're going to see Seattle with 2 professional sports teams in the NBA and the NHL. So give me some comments down below if you think that's going to happen. If not, tell me what you think will happen. If it's not Seattle getting the next franchise in either of those professional sports leagues, then who's it going to be? And we'll catch you in the next video. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button. If you're new to the channel and you want to keep up with all the latest sports and hockey news, hit that subscribe button in the middle of your screen so you can keep watching Top Shelf Hockey.